Morning, Acharya ji.
ॐ
ॐ
सदाशिवसमारम्भां
सदाशिवसमारम्भाम्
शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम्
शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम्
अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां
अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम्
वन्दे
वन्दे
गुरुपरम्पराम्
गुरुपरम्पराम्
ॐ सहनावतु
सहना भवतु
भुनक्तु
भुनक्तु
सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै
वीर्यङ्करवावहै
तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा
तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा
विद्विषावहै
विद्विषावहै
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति
शान्ति
शान्तिः
शान्ति
हरि ओम्. Okay, so we were on the seventh mantra of the fourth section of the first chapter, 147. And in that mantra, we found the Anupravesha Shrutihi. So what was that? Sa Esha Iha Pravishtaha. And we finished discussing what is meant by sa, saha, he, right? So Shankaracharya came to the conclusion that he here means Brahman alone in this context, because there is a third meaning which fits with the later discussion, Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. Right. Then we were seeing the meaning of Pravishtaha or Anupraveshaha, which is the entry. And we are looking at the various what they call meanings possible. We saw that physical entry cannot be there, where it is constructed and entry with the same person. We saw that we cannot say that Paramatma built and Jivatma entered. So builder is one and entry is done by somebody else. We did not, we saw that that was not possible. And we saw that there is no question of Ishvara entering and Jiva creating. Right. We also saw the business about Nayayika. Right. Nayayika, who says that for some time there is no guna, and then it becomes then there is a guna for some time. Therefore, if Paramatma is like a gunam, like an attribute, we said Paramatma becomes a dependent entity. Therefore, that is also not possible, we had said. Okay. What else remains? We talked about the fourth option, which is like a fruit ripening. One part becomes ripe, the other part doesn't become ripe. That also we saw that's not true, because that's a modification. And Shankara said that how can you call a modification by the name entry? That is also not possible. There is no modification ever possible in the case of Paramatma. And then there is a fifth option which we had not yet discussed, and that is what we will see today. Fifth option is what? Just as a object is reflected in some mirror, similarly the reflection of Paramatma is formed in the Jiva's body, right? And this formation of the reflection is called the Paramatma, entry of the Paramatma is called the Anupraveshaha. Just as when the sun is reflected in the mirror, you can say that the sun has entered the mirror. That is the fifth meaning possible. What is the objection? Shankaracharya says that if you are going to say that my face will enter the reflecting mirror, then you are saying there is a second face, something other than me, right? The question of reflection comes up only when you accept the second thing. So there has to be a reflecting object, in this case my face, and there has to be a reflecting medium which the face should be reflected in. But in the case of Brahman, Shankaracharya says Brahman is Param Brahma, right? Where is the question of reflecting object and reflecting medium? There is no thing other than Brahman in this entire universe. Sarvam idam Brahmaiva. So where there is no second thing, where is the question of a reflected entity? Where is the question of a Pratibimba entity also? So there is no entry possible at all, right? And therefore Shankara says this fifth option is also not possible. Now comes the confusion. Then what was all that we talked about in Tattva? We talked about reflected consciousness. We talked about reflecting medium. We talked about original consciousness. How do you reconcile this with the negation of the fifth object, fifth idea, where Shankara says that there is no reflection at all possible because there is no second entity called the reflecting medium at all, right? What is the only possible explanation?
The
That
Vachya,
is mithya. All the reflected entities are mithya.
Right. So whatever these
And
five discussions we have, 5 points were discussed, they were talking about Satyam only. A first Satyam face and a Satyam mirror. Right? And that is what Shankaracharya was refuting. The only possible explanation is that there is a second object, but it is the reflecting medium is not Satyam, it is Mithya. Right? And therefore Shankara gives the essence. He says this Anupravesha Shruti should not be taken literally. Right? It is meant to explain the Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam, the oneness between the Jiva and the Paramatma. It is meant to explain. And therefore, it has to be taken not as the Tatparyam of the Shruti,
Guru
but as
or
a
Brahma,
Arthavada portion.
where there is only these things happen. Tarati Shokam, then he goes.
Okay, somebody was listening to something else, and I have muted that. All right, so let us carry on. So Shankaracharya says that you can't treat it as a tatparyam of the Shruti at all. It has to be taken as a Arthavada portion. Arthavada is meant to explain something important, but it is definitely not the tatparya. So what is the Anupravesha Shruti trying to explain? It is trying to explain Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam only. Therefore, the Anupravesha, the entry of the Paramatma should be understood, says Shankara, as the idea that Paramatma is available in the mind. As what? As Sakshi. Right? And once you have understood that this Sakshi in the mind is no other than the Paramatma Brahman. How do you understand? Why do you say that there is Brahman and there is Sakshi? Why can't you simply say that Brahman is there in the mind? Because Brahman is all pervading and the mind is all pervading or limited.
individual mind is
limited.
limited.
Individual mind is limited. Therefore, when you say that Brahman is there in the mind, there is a very seeming limitation to that Brahman. Right? What is the seeming limitation? It's like the Ghata Akasha, the space in the pot, which you refer to as the pot space, but which is not really different from the total space, right? But remember that pot space is has a difference from total space in one crucial aspect. What is that?
When there is a form of a ghata.
Sorry?
When there is a form, when there's a ghata, only then the Mahakasha and the Ghata Akasha seem different.
The limitation to the pot space, yes, as you say, the limitation to this pot space is a seeming one given by the presence of the pot, the upadhi. Right? But that upadhi performs another function also, apart from limiting that, seemingly limiting the akasha. What is the function? It makes it gives it utility. That pot space becomes utilizable for storing water. Can you store water in Mahakasha? You can't. But in the pot space, you can. So it is as if there is some sort of utility given by the Upadhi, and that is the limiting factor for which you say pot space, Gata Akasha. It is for understanding only, because when the Gata breaks, there is no difference. Pot space doesn't go and join the Mahakasha. There never was a difference. The Upadhi pot, which is actually in the Mahakasha, that breaks, and the pot space is now just renamed as Mahakasha. Gata Akasha doesn't become Mahakasha, it gives a different label. Right? Similarly, when this Brahman is available in the mind, as this Sakshi Chaitanyam, what is the utility?
At Vyavharika level.
Utility is at Vyavharika level, because the fact that you can think, the fact that you can become, the mind becomes functional, becomes alive, the fact that the mind is recognized, that is the Sakshi's function. So remember that when you wake up, you say I am. Even if you don't say it, you know that you are, right? That is a function of the Sakshi recognizing the mind. Everything else is Sakshi plus mind. But the mind is revealed not by the mind, but by Sakshi. And thereafter, Sakshi, together with the mind, become the Pramata, etc., etc. Right? So that is the difference between Sakshi and Brahman. Again, it's a seeming difference. There is no real difference at all. But that utility is given because of the Upadhi of the mind. I hope we are clear, because there's a lot of confusion about what is a Sakshi and what is Brahman or Atma. This idea should be very, very clear.
But
Right.
then our understanding that it's a reflected OC, which was taught in Tattvabodha, or what we learned in Tattvabodha.
Yeah.
Actually, it has the same meaning, that it is mithyatvam, or it is a reflecting medium is nothing but a different order of reality.
Reflecting medium is a different order of reality, yes. Mind is different order of reality, yes. Right.
So only available at Vyavharika level.
Available at the Vyavaharika level.
Yeah.
At the
So that
Paramarthik level.
is that understanding a simple, clear understanding? That's what my
Yeah.
point.
At the Paramarthika level, there is no mind at all. And therefore, the question of, whether it's a reflection or not, it's not going to be there. Right? In fact, there are very many theories about this. We will do it when we do Vichara Sagara. That's much later in life. Okay. Anyway, so now here Shankara says that having understood that when you say Anupravesha is there, when you say Paramatma entered the mind, just understand that Paramatma is available in the mind as a Sakshi. And that Paramatma is not different from the Sakshi. Therefore, there is a Aikyam of Jivatma Paramatma. So this whole business of Srishti, creation, was being done just to explain this point. That's why I said it's a Arthavada. Right? The emphasis is not what came first and whether there are Pancha Mahabhuta or three Mahabhutas or two Mahabhutas. This is not very relevant to us. Once you have understood that the Aikyam is there between Jivatma and Paramatma, the Srishti topic becomes irrelevant. Okay. So this is something which we tell when we come to advanced Vedanta. That everything else apart from Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam is not really relevant. And therefore you shouldn't expend your energy in analyzing the Srishti or in comparing different ways in which different texts handle Srishti, or even in handling the Pravesha part. Brihadaranyaka says one Pravesha, Chandogya says another Pravesha. Right? Let us not enter into all that. It's a waste of time because it's a Arthavada topic. Therefore, what should you understand? Paramatma Jivatma Rupena Vartate. Paramatma is found as the Jivatma in the mind. And if you have understood that, then the Anupravesh Shruti has been properly understood. So again to repeat, Paramatma entered means Paramatma is available. Where in the mind of the Jivatma, in the form of the Sakshi serves the Sakshi plus the mind, it makes the mind utilizable, right? And once you understood this, the Pravesha part, the entry part, we should forget about. The Anupravesha part, we should forget about. What should we remember? The availability part. That Paramatma entered is now no longer relevant to us. It was meant as a Arthavada for the purpose of understanding. So we drop that part from our memory. And what should we keep? Paramatma is available in the mind as the Sakshi Chaitanyam only. Right? With this, the Anupravesha Shruti is over. Remember the conclusion. Jivatma eva Paramatma. Jivatma is the same as Paramatma. And that is why you can boldly say, Aham Brahmasmi. Okay. Do you have any objections to this whole story? You don't have. You may not have, but there are several Purvapakshis who have. And as we are studying that, we have to look at those also. So there is a normal Ajnani, a layman, so to say. The first one, the first Purvapakshi. He says that I don't accept that Jivatma is Paramatma. Right? What are the reasons? It's very simple. He says everybody knows Jivatmas are many and Paramatma is one. If you say that Jivatma is equal to Paramatma, the second statement that Paramatma is only one is illogical because every Jivatma has to be equivalent to Paramatma. And Jivatmas are different. Therefore, there must be as many Paramatmas as there are as many Jivatmas. And this is not acceptable because everybody knows that there is only one God. Okay. So Shankaracharya responds. He says, you say that there are many Jivatmas, but that is a misconception. Why is it a misconception? Because you are attributing the upadhis, you are labeling the upadhis as the main entity. There are many minds which are the upadhis, and therefore you think that there are many jivatmas. The plurality, the multiplicity of the minds, you are superimposing upon the sakshi. So Shankara says that is incorrect. I agree that minds are many, but there is only one sakshi, the witness consciousness. The confusion is what most people who are not exposed to Vedanta, for them, mind means sakshi. And therefore, the more the number of minds, the more the number of sakshis. Right? What you should understand, he says, is that there are many minds which are illumined, which are revealed. But the revealer, sakshi, is only one. Just like the sun is one, but it reveals so many objects. Right? Therefore, similarly, Sakshi is one, only one, but there are several minds. What is the Pramanam? Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. There is only one Kshetrajnaha, one Sakshi. Sarva kshetreshu, that same Kshetrajna appears in all the Kshetra. With this Ajnani's objection is ruled out, disposed of. Then comes the second objection. He says, okay, you say that Jivatma is equal to Paramatma. But what is my observation? Every Jivatma is full of Dukkham, Sukham, Ragam, Dvesham. Right? Samsaritvam. is seen in every Jivatma. Now, if you say that Jivatma is identical to Paramatma, what is the conclusion? Jivatma is samsari and therefore Paramatma also is a samsari. But that is also not acceptable because all the Upanishads uniformly say that Ishvara is not a samsari. This is the objection. What is the answer? Shankara says, when Jivatma and Paramatma are said to be identical by Shruti, the statement, the Shruti Vakyam should be understood properly. What is the purpose of Shastram? It is to liberate people, give moksha, right? Therefore, the right interpretation is that Jivatma is to be freed from samsara, from dukkham or sorrow. Not that Paramatma is not free from sorrow. So, what the Shruti Vakyam says, when Shruti says Jivatma, again somebody's, I would request you all to please put off your mics. So, when Shruti says that Jivatma is equal to Paramatma, Shruti is not saying that if Jivatma is sorrowful, Paramatma is also sorrowful. You have to realign your vision. Shruti is saying just as Paramatma is free from samsara, know that Jivatma is also free from samsara. That is a statement, right? And therefore, when you say that Jivatma is samsari, actually that statement is a confusion. It is a delusion. It's a adhyasa. The correct understanding is that Paramatma is free from samsara. Similarly, Jivatma is actually free from samsara. That is the import of the Shruti statement. Therefore, if you think as a Jivatma, you are a samsari, that is a adhyasa, that is a delusion. And it is the job of the Shastram to remove that delusion and show you that you are not a samsari. With this, the second objection is also removed. Then there is a third objection. He says, this person says, Shruti may say that Jivatma is free from samsara, from sorrow. But remember, Shankaracharya ji, that you yourself have been quoting the Mimamsa rules. What are the Mimamsa rules? If Shruti says something and that is opposed to Pratyaksha Pramanam, then you cannot accept the Shruti teaching. So Shruti is saying that Jivatma is not a samsari, is free from samsara. But Pratyaksha showed me what? That I am always sorrowful. And therefore Pratyaksha is contradicting Shruti. Therefore I cannot accept Shruti teaching as it is. It will have to be reinterpreted in such a way that the Pratyaksham is not contradicted. Right? For example, if Veda says Agni is cold, will you accept? No, you will not accept. Similarly, when Shruti says Jivatma is not a samsari, my Pratyaksham says I am a samsari, I am a Jivatma. Therefore, I cannot accept Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. It is not a fact at all. That Shruti statement is invalid. Okay. Now Shankaracharya says that when you say that Jivatma is samsari, are you saying that every Jivatma is a mixture of two things, Atma, Anatma. Right. So he says the samsaritvam, the dukkham or the sorrow, can be never experienced in Atma. Why? Because Atma is never an object of experience. So very, subtle argument. You as a Jivatma are a mixture of Atma, Anatma. We actually have seen this argument before, long ago, where anybody remembers in the first teaching verse of Bhagavad Gita, 2.11, same argument was used that you are a combination of Atma, Jivatma. You say you are experiencing sorrow. Now, Atma cannot experience sorrow, is never an object of experience. Therefore, you cannot say that Atma is experiencing sorrow. Whatever is experienced is by Anatma only. Therefore, you cannot argue that Atma is sorrowful. It has to be the Mithya combination where the Atma plus Anatma, which itself is Mithya, says that they are experiencing sorrow. And Atma plus Anatma is not Jivatma. Jivatma is Atma only. And therefore that the argument is not valid. Okay. So far, these are normal people like you and me who are arguing. Now comes a Darshanavadi, that is Shanikavadi, Buddhist. He is called a Shanika Vijnanavadi. Right? What does it say? That Atma is there only for a moment. So he says, he agrees that Atma cannot be experienced. Atma is not Pramayam, he agrees. But he says Atma can experience itself. And when Atma experiences itself, that is when Atma experiences Atma, Atma experiences the sorrow also. Therefore, Atma Dukkham, the sorrow in the Atma, is definitely an object of knowledge. It's a very fine argument. Atma, I agree, is not an object of knowledge. But the sorrow in the Atma is an object of knowledge. And therefore he says, of course, it cannot be the Paramatma, which is free of sorrow. So the statement is wrong. Shankara argues saying that you say your crux of your theory is that Atma experiences itself. When you say Atma experiences itself, what two things are there? When you say that I see the rose, there are two things. What are they?
I and
Uh, I and the rose.
You and the rose. When you say Atma experiences itself, there are two things also. What is that?
The Atma, the experiencer, and Atma, the existence.
Atma, the experiencer, and the Atma, the Prameyam, the object of the experience. Shankara says, what nonsense? How can one and the same Atma become this object and the object of the same experience? Right? Because the one who sees, he can never be seen, right? Or more what you call a more pungent line. The one who is eating cannot be eating himself, right? The teacher cannot be the student at the same time. Therefore, he can never experience himself. Therefore, Atma experiencing itself is a logical contradiction, and therefore that is also rejected. Shanika Vijnanavadi is rejected. Then comes another Purvapakshi. He says, fine, I agree that Atma cannot experience itself. But why can't you say that one part of the Atma is subject and another part of the Atma is object, right? When I am looking at my hand, I am both the experiencer and the experienced. Why? From the standpoint of my eyes, I am the seer of the hand. From the standpoint of my hand, I am the seen, and therefore I am seeing myself. This is possible. Therefore, one part of Atma sees another part. So one part is Atma, the seer, another part of the Atma, sorrow is there. Therefore, that Atma seeing the sorrow is Atma experiencing itself. What will Shankara say?
Atma
Yes,
has no parts.
no parts in it.
Excellent. Atma is nirabsha. It has no parts. It has no divisions. Therefore, you cannot say that Atma experiences its own sorrow. Okay, these are all, arguments which we will never think of. And therefore, Shankara thinks of it and puts it in so that our mananam is complete. That is the whole idea of this bhashyam. All bhashyams are trying to ensure that you think of things which you normally would not think of, and then he provides the answer also. Right. So now another Puravakshi comes. He is a Nayayika, Tarkika, right? The logical fellow. So he says Jivatma is free from sorrow and Jivatma is equal to Paramatma. Both these statements cannot be right. Why? Because in Tarka Shastra he says, and in fact Tarka Shastra says that all these emotions, Raga, Dvesha, Sukham, Dukham, all these belong to Atma. And therefore he says your idea that Jivatma is free from sorrow and same time Jivatma is equal to Paramatma is wrong. Okay? Because of the fact that we know in our like Nayayika Shastram, we know that all these are gunas which belong to the Atma. Raga, Dvesha, Sukham, Dukham. Shankara says, okay. But he says, you say that you have established. But what do I say? I say that Tarka Shastra is full of fallacies, full of mistakes. And he points out some of the mistakes. He says, first mistake is this. The first thing that you say is that Atma is eternal, Nityam. And then you say that Dukkham, sorrow, is a guna of Atma. Guna here means attribute, property. Therefore, the Tatvika is saying that number one, Atma is Nityam, eternal. Number two, Dukkham is the attribute, the guna of Atma. Therefore, in other words, Atma is the guni, the one who has the gunam is the guni, and Dukkham is the gunam. When that happens, gunam and guni are not separable. Substance and property cannot be separated. You cannot say that the ice and the coldness I will separate. And Shankara says, you say that Dukkham is Anityam also. So what is the argument? First you say that Atma is a Guni. Then you say Dukkham is the Guna. Right? You also say that Dukkham is Anityam. What is a fallacy? How can the Anitya Dukkham be there in the Nitya Atma all the time? Because the Gunam and Guni are not separable. As long as the Guni is there, the Gunam has to be there. You cannot say that Dukkham is Anitya. If they are indeed inseparable, Atma is Nityam, Dukkham must also be Nityam. But the Tarkika himself says that Atma is not always sorrowful. Occasionally it is sorrow. And therefore, you cannot say that Anitya sorrow is present in Nitya Atma. Right? Then, that is the first mistake, saying that the temporary sorrow is present in the permanent Atma. That is the first mistake in Tarka Shastram. Right? For which the Nayayika has no answer. Now, in Tarka Shastram, Atma is known through Anumanam, not through the Veda. In Vedanta, what do we say? The Pramanam for Atma is Shruti. But Tarka Shastram says Pramanam for Atma is Anumanam, inference. Right? And therefore, Atma has got sorrow, which is Pratyaksham. What is Pratyaksham? The sorrow is Pratyaksham, right? Directly experienced. Right? Nobody says that, no, I infer that I am unhappy. Right? You cannot say that I infer that I'm unhappy because of such and such a thing happening in my life. No. You are saying I am unhappy That is the experience of direct perception. Therefore, therefore the Nayayika says, that is why I am saying that Atma is inferred entity, because my sorrow I can experience. Sorrow is pratyaksham. From that pratyaksham experience, what is my anumanam? What is my inference? That there is a Atma which is sorrowful. Right? So, here, how can a pratyaksha guna, an attribute which is perceptible, belong to a entity which is inferred? That is the question. How can you say that the perceived property belongs to a substance which has to be inferred from the perception? Right? What is the problem? What is the logical fallacy? Think about it. When I say that I am perceiving a guna and therefore I am inferring the existence of the guni, what is the problem with that statement? It's a logical problem.
Like we just said that gunas come and go, they are not permanent, they are not.
No, no, no.
No.
It's the partial knowledge about guni, because aguni may have multiple gunas, and with only one guna inference.
There is a very basic problem here. When you say a rose is red, I am seeing the redness and therefore there is a rose. Is that a correct statement?
No.
Why?
Many things can be red. It doesn't have to be the rose.
You are looking at the wrong way. When you say the rose is red, or when you say there is redness, what is there which is already perceived?
The color.
The color of
No,
the
the
color.
object is perceived. You are perceiving the
Name and
object
form.
and then you are saying it is red.
The form is perceived.
So you cannot perceive an attribute without perceiving the vastu. That is a logical fallacy. You can never say such and such a guna belongs to such and such a vastu unless you are seeing the vastu. Is it not so? When you say that is a black car, what have you seen first?
The car.
The car.
Can you say I am seeing black, therefore it must be a car?
No, no.
That is what this Tarkika is saying. So the objection is this. That objection is also dismissed. Okay, now there is a third approach. That is second meaning, second error in the Tarkika's Shastram itself. Then Shankara talks about the third error. The Tarka Shastra talks about Atma having sorrow, dukkha, right? But the problem is that in Tarka Shastra, Atma is jadam, inert. Then how does Tarka Shastra explain how that inert Atma becomes sorrowful? He says that when the Atma, which is the inert Atma, which is all pervading, that inert Atma comes in contact with the mind, right? Then Jnanam comes. What happens? The Atma comes in contact with the mind. The Atma therefore joins the mind. The mind joins the Indriyas. The Indriyas perceive the objects. Therefore Jnanam comes. And therefore depending upon the object, the Sukham and Dukkham are born. Once this Sukham and Dukkham are born, they are properties. Because they are properties, they have to, because they attributes, gunas, they have to belong to some vastu, some guni. Right? So Jnanam is a property, happiness is a property, all these should belong to some vastu only. Now question is whether these attributes belong to the objects. or whether the attributes belong to the indriyas, or whether the object attributes belong to the mind, or whether the attributes belong to the Atma. So Tarkashastra says that sorrow and pleasure belong to the Atma, even though they are produced with the help of the mind and the objects. That is Tarkashastra's theory, that my Atma is inert, but when it joins the mind, sorrow and etc. are generated, and those generated emotions, they belong to the Atma, not to the objects. Now Shankara says that Atma can never join the mind. Why? He picks up the teaching from Tarkashastra itself. Right? He uses the fact that Tarkashastra is contradicting itself. Tarkashastra says a combination is possible only between two entities which have got forms. That is Tarkashastra's own teaching. Two entities which have got forms, they can combine. But they themselves say that Atma is all pervading, which means what? Atma is formless, right? And just as space, being formless, cannot be said to combine with anything else. It can be the substratum of everything. But space cannot combine. Buildings can exist in space, mountains can exist in space, but you cannot say that space is combining with the mountains and the buildings. Similarly, Atma being formless, you cannot say that Atma joins the mind, is combining with the mind. Therefore, that view also cannot be accepted. So, one by one, he is demolishing various views. Then the Jaina Darshanam, Jaina Matam comes into the picture. The Jaini says that you are taking Atma as formless and all-pervading. That is the main problem, right? Jainism says Atma is the size of Anu. And the size, in fact, in size of the Shariram, not the Anu. So Atma is not all-pervading according to Jainism. It is limited to the body, right? So in Shastram there are three units of measurement. One is called Anu, smallest. We roughly say atom. One is the biggest, which we call Vibhu, all-pervading. And one is the middle, which is called Madhyama. So any measurement between the smallest and the biggest is Madhyama. Therefore, it is Atma is Madhyama Parimanaha. It is limited to the size of the body. Right? So, anything which you have in your hand, a glass, is Madhyama Parimanaha. The earth is Madhyama Parimanaha. The moon is Madhyama Parimanaha. Right? So, Madhyama means anything between the minutest size and the all-pervading size. This is the teaching of the Jaina Matam. And the Jaini says this is the reason why you have problems. You take Atma as belonging only to the body and all your problems as the size of only the body, and all your problems will resolve. So there is a very detailed refutation of this Jaina Matam, which we will do when we start Brahma Sutras. Until then, I'll just briefly tell you what he says. Shankara says that if Atma has got a form and a shape, what is the problem? Atma will be perishable and anityam. Because everything that has a shape and a form has got a beginning and an end. This is the experience of perception also. And Shankara says, you say Atma is Nityam, which is also the view of many other darshanas like Sankhya, Nayaka, all these darshanas say Atma is Nityam. If you say Atma is Nityam, then Atma should be Nir Avayava. Nir Avayava means what? without parts. Avayava is parts. Nir avayava is without parts. So Shankara says if Atma is Nityam, then Atma has to be without parts. What is the corollary? If Atma has got parts, then Atma is Anityaha. Therefore, Nityatvam, the status of being eternal, and Sa Avayavatvam, the status of having a form. Sa Avayatvam. Sa Vayavatvam. Nityatvam and Sa Vayavatvam, having a form, cannot go together. So this Jaini Purvapakshi comes up and says, no, no. There are some exceptional cases where even things which have a form are Nitya. He gives the example of Vajram. Vajram means not Indra's weapon here. Vajram means what? Diamonds, right? Vajram is diamonds. So Jaini says that I am giving you the example of diamonds which are permanent, eternal in nature. Is this true?
No, carbon
Why?
actually.
Diamonds
Diamonds
are
are
actually formed. They have a
mm,
birth because under long
pressure. Mm,
high pressure temperature and long time
mm.
they are formed. Right. So it's difficult to destroy. Yes, but it is not eternal. So the Jaini Matam person, Jaini Purapakshi, he does not see the diamond coming into being. And since diamonds are difficult to destroy, he does not see a diamond being destroyed. So two things he has not seen. The origination and the destruction of diamond. And therefore he thinks it is Nityam. But just because you have not seen the origination and the destruction doesn't mean that there is no origination and no destruction. So Shankara says that this anityatvam, the perishability, need not always be proved only through perception. It is a logical derivation also that when something is born, it will definitely perish. Right? You take the example of science. We have not seen the sun being born, but science tells you that during the Big Bang, the sun was born. Since it is born, we all know that the sun will perish sometime in the future. This knowledge is what? It is logic, anumanam, inference, not perception. So with this, all these poor Pakshis have been dismissed. And with this, the Bhashyam on Anupravesha is over. So, any questions so far? All very, very deep subjects. You don't get to see them anywhere else.
Kumaraji,
Yeah.
as you said that from guna, gunis cannot be inferred or we cannot talk about. So the example was that red. So before we say this, we have to experience that object.
Yeah.
Now, just here in the end, when we are talking about that, if something is partless, we can say it is nitya.
Yeah.
And if something has part, we will say anitya.
Yeah.
So this is also one type of inference only, na? From the this partless or part, we are talking about that nityam or anityam.
No, it's logic. It's logic. See, basically, anything which has parts can be dismantled. When something
Okay.
has parts, how will you dismantle it? Can you blow up space? Can you cut space? You can't dismantle space because it has no parts. It's the same logic. Anything which is assembly can be disassembled. Something which is not an assembly at all, like space, what can you do to it? Nothing can be done to it.
So
Anything which
basically,
is
all
a
or
part.
nothing. Yes, please go ahead. Vidyaji.
So I said anything which is a part can be put apart.
Anything which is a part, which has parts, can be taken apart. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
with this, the Pravesha Bhashyam is over. Then what is the next topic? To what extent? So you say Brahman has done Pravesha. Brahman has entered the body. To what extent has it entered the body? So look at the mantra. A nakhagrebhya. Nakha is the nails. A here means up to. So that Brahman enters the body and pervades up to the nails. Up to the nails is a very important idea. Not including the nails. Why? Because you don't cry when the nails are cut.
No, no.
Right? There is no, the consciousness, though it pervades there, the nail is not a reflecting medium for consciousness. It is definitely a reflecting medium for existence. And what is not a reflecting medium for consciousness
Mm,
cannot experience any
right.
emotion, any pain. So you have to clearly remember all this. Okay, so anakhagrabhya means up to the periphery of the body. Right, and then Shankara gives examples. So he says, he gives example of a razor. Now that's a razor which, you know, normally in the old days, when you have a razor, or even now, if you go to the barber shop, the razor doesn't mean the safety razor. It means the blade, the big blade in which the barber used to shave in the old days. Where does he keep it? He keeps it in a bag, right? So he says, Shankara gives the example of the razor and says that razor is in the bag. Similarly, Atma is also in the bag. What is the bag of the Atma?
The body.
The body, right? The idea is that the razor is found in the razor's bag, and therefore Atma is found in the Atma's bag, which is the body. So that's the first example he gives. Then he says there is another example. Vishwambharaha. Vishwambharaha means that he himself gives the, Shankara himself gives the derivation. So Vishwam Vivarti iti Vishwambharaha. Vishwam Vivarti, that which sustains the whole Vishwam, the whole universe, that is Vishwambharaha. Right? So, and Vishwambharaha normally in Shastram is also taken another name for Agni, for fire. Why? Because fire is very important in sustaining the whole creation. Therefore, he says Vishwambhara Kulaya. Kulaya means the residence, the locus. Vishwambhara Kulaya means the locus of the fire. Right. Now, which is the locus of fire? When we say fire, you have to remember how fire is produced in Shastra.
Running.
Arani. The lower Arani and the
Upper
upper
and lower.
Arani. Therefore, which is the locus?
Between two.
The
In the
locus is in
space.
the Arani. Right? The locus is the Arani. By churning alone, you are producing that Arani. The locus, Arani is already having the fire. By churning, you are just manifesting the fire. Because Asat Karyavada, if it is not there in potential form, it won't be manifested. So everything that you have studied, you must apply in understanding these arguments. So Arani Mathanam, which means moving the Arani, upper Arani is churned in the lower Arani. That is the way that the fire is produced according to Shastram for rituals. And that therefore the fire is in the Arani in the potential and unmanifest form. So Shankara is saying just as the Agni obtains or is found in the Arani, just as razor is found in the barber's bag, in the same way, the Paramatma as the Sakshi is found in the body also, Jiva's body. What is the significance of these two examples? When you take out the razor from the razor's bag, you will see that it was present in only one part of the bag. The razor doesn't pervade the whole bag, right? Whereas when you come to the Agni example, you can't say Agni is present only in the lower Agni or in the upper Agni or in a part of the lower Arani or in the upper Arani or a part of the Arani. It pervades the entire Arani wood, right? Therefore, being found in a specific part of the bag, like the razor, is called Vishesha Vritti, specific availability. While being available generally all over the wood is called Samanya Vritti or general availability. What is the important part about these two discussions? Shankara doesn't say. But Anandagiri says, makes it very clear, that when we say that Atma is found in the body, remember that it is found as both these, as both Vishesha Vritti and Samanya Vritti. It is found both as specifically available and generally available. How? So he gives an example. He says during Jagrat and Swapna Avastha, you are using always one particular organ or the other organ to function as the seer, drashta, the hearer, shrota, the thinker, vinyata. Right? So during these roles of functioning as this drashta, shrota or vinyata, as the seer, the hearer or the thinker, the Atma is available specifically in those organs. He adds eva, as if it is available. Why is as if important? Because Atma is not available only in the ears, it's available everywhere else also. But during the function of seeing, it is more active in the eyes. During the function of hearing, it is as if it is more active during the ears. Therefore, in these two avasthas, seeing and hearing and thinking is only done during Jagrata and Swapna avastha, right? So in these two avasthas, Atma is available as Vishesha Vritti, specific Vritti. But in Sushupti avastha, there is no organ being used. Mind is resolved, ears are resolved, Indriyas are resolved, and therefore in the Sushupti avastha, you will find that the specific role of any organ doesn't come into play, and therefore you have to say that in Sushupti, Atma is generally available, not as Vishesha Vritti, but as Samanya Vritti. Okay, then look at the other words. Tam na pasyati. Sorry, go ahead.
Om sir, sorry for the interruption. But when I'm in Jagrat and Jagrat Avastha, like I'm listening to you and watching you, I'm using both senses. I'm not using just my eyes, I'm using my ears also. So will that still count for
Yeah,
Vishesha?
ideally you should be using only the ears, okay? Not looking at me. Because
Okay.
actually you're bifurcating attention. But anyway, even if you say you're doing both, you're still like in driving, you do both. Like you see and you focus. I mean, it's specific
Still this
availability
is
only.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Then the next three words are tam na pashyanti. Even though I am that Paramatma, tam na pashyanti. Nobody understands this fact. Nobody understands that I am available generally and specifically also. Nobody here means what? Samsaris. So question here is, how do you say that I, Sakshi, am not known? So the correct answer is that everybody knows that I am the Sakshi, but they don't know the Sakshi in the way in which it should be known. There is no question of total Atma Ajnanam. Nobody ever has Sakshi Ajnanam. When anybody says I am, it is Atma Ajnanam. It's Atma Jnanam only. When you say I am, it is definitely Atma Jnanam. But the problem is that it is usually referring to the body or the mind. Therefore, it is partial jnanam, and therefore confusion comes. Why the confusion? Because Sakshi is available not only in the body, but in the Indriyam, in the mind, everywhere. And because of the proximity of the Sakshi to all the parts of the body, the attributes of the body are given to the Sakshi, and the Sakshi's attributes are given to the body. This is called Anyonya
Anyonya Adhyasa.
Adhyasa, mutual Adhyasa. Superimposing the Sakshi's attributes onto the body and superimposing the body's attributes onto the Sakshi. This is called, these things are called Upadhi. So what is Upadhi? We will discuss in the next class. Any questions? Okay. Oh, Punamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevasishyate Om
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you
Om
for your
Namah
patience.
Shivaya.
Thank you,
Thank
Ruchi.
you, Acharya ji.